Today we're going to explore exactly how to define structs, how to use them, and, this is really important, how ownership plays into all of it. So, let's start with the basics. What is a struct in Rust? Well, a struct is simply a way of grouping related data together. Think of it like a custom data type where you define what pieces of data, what fields, you want it to have. Let's define our very first struct. Here, we've defined a struct called user with 2 fields. Nothing fancy yet, just a way of grouping data. Now let's create an instance of that struct. Notice how we use string, from, for the string types. That's because string is a heap-allocated type, and we're constructing new instances here. Also notice how we access the fields, just like with dot notation, user1.username. Now here's something interesting. What if we want to change the email of the user? Let's try. Wait, the compiler is going to yell at us unless we declare user1 as mutable. So let's do that. Perfect. So by default, all variables in Rust are immutable, including struct instances. We need to make them mutable if we plan to change their fields. Now let's say we want to create another user, but most of the data is the same as user1. Do we have to type it all again? Not at all. Rust gives us a really nice shorthand. This means, create a new user where email is different, but all the other fields are copied from user1. However, keep in mind that fields like string follow move semantics, so after this line, user1 is no longer valid unless the fields being copied implement copy. In simple words, when you use struct update syntax, user1, with types like string, which manage their data on the heap, the data owned by the fields not explicitly overridden in the new struct, for example, username from user1, is moved to the corresponding fields in the new struct, user2. This transfer of ownership means that the original variable, user1, no longer possesses that data and becomes invalid to prevent memory errors like double freeing. The only exception to this move behavior is if the fields being copied implement the copy trait, like integers or booleans. In that case, instead of a move, a true bitwise copy occurs, and the original struct would remain valid. Since string does not implement copy, as a bitwise copy wouldn't copy the heap data, leading to shared ownership and potential issues, its data is moved, invalidating user1. This mechanism is fundamental to Rust's memory safety guarantees, preventing common programming errors like use after free and double free. But what if you want to keep the user1 valid after creating user2? To do that, you need to ensure that the fields being copied from user1 are actually cloned rather than moved. Since string does not implement the copy trait, you'll need to explicitly clone it. Here's how you can do this. Instead of using struct update syntax, we use this line, user1.username.clone. The .clone method explicitly creates a deep copy of the string data on the heap. This means a new string is allocated for user2.username with the same content as user1.username, but it's an independent piece of data. 2.username with the same content as user1.username, but it's an independent piece of data. Now because user1.username was cloned and not moved, user1 retains ownership of its original username, string, and remains completely valid and usable after user2 is created. To keep user1 valid, you must ensure that any non-copy fields are cloned rather than moved. In scenarios where you only have 1 or 2 non-copy fields you want to copy, while keeping the original valid, explicitly cloning them is the clearest approach. Let's talk ownership. What happens when we pass a struct to a function? Here is a function, print username with 1 argument, user. We are calling this function from the main. When user1, an instance of the user struct, is passed to the print username function, ownership of user1 and all its contained string data, username and email, is moved into the user parameter of the function. After print username completes and its scope ends, the user parameter, and thus the user instance it owned, is dropped, deallocating the string data. Consequently, back in main, user1 is no longer considered valid because its ownership has been transferred and its data potentially freed, leading to a compile time error if you attempt to access user1.email or any part of user1 after the function call, as Rust prevents use after move scenarios to ensure memory safety. So, how do we avoid that? We can borrow the struct. And now, we've passed a reference, so user1 is still valid. To do that, print username function is modified to accept a reference to the user struct, and the call in main is changed to pass a reference of user1. This change means that print username no longer takes ownership of user1. Instead, it borrows a reference to it. The function can read user1's data through this reference, but it cannot modify or deallocate user1 itself. Consequently, after print username finishes, user1 remains valid in main scope, allowing you to access its email field without a compile time error, as the ownership of user1 was never transferred. Rust also supports something called tuple structs. They look like tuples, but with a name. These are useful when you want to give semantic meaning to a tuple. You don't name the fields, but you name the struct itself. Sometimes you don't need any data at all. That's where unit-like structs come in. This can be useful for things like marker traits or unit testing mock objects. You can also use structs with functions to make your code reusable. For example, this constructor function demonstrates how to use a function to construct instances of that struct. The build user function takes two string arguments, email and username, and uses them to create and return a new user instance. Within build user, the shorthand field initialization syntax email, username is used, which is equivalent to full syntax where the parameter name and the field name is separated by a colon, when the parameter names match the struct field names. In main, build user is called with string literals converted to string types, and the returned user instance is bound to the user variable, whose fields can then be accessed and printed. Now what if you want to debug your structs? We can use derive attribute with debug trait. This is a convenient way to print debug information for a custom struct in Rust. By adding this above the user struct definition, you instruct the Rust compiler to automatically implement the debug trait for user. This trait provides a way to format a value for debugging purposes. Consequently, when the print function is called in main using the debug format specifier, the debug implementation is invoked, which then prints a structured, human-readable representation of the user instance, including the names and values of its fields, which is invaluable for quickly inspecting the state of a struct during development. But still, this looks a little ugly, right? For pretty printing, we can use pretty print format specifier, #?, to output the user struct with more readable, multi-line, indented formatting, making complex data structures easier to inspect. Let's collect everything together with an example. This Rust code defines a rectangle struct with width and height fields, annotated with #derive debug, to enable easy printing for debugging. A function named area is implemented, which takes an immutable reference of rectangle to a rectangle instance, allowing it to calculate and return the area without taking ownership of the struct. In main, an instance rect1 of rectangle is created, and its area is calculated by calling the function area, passing a reference of rect1. Finally, both the calculated area and the rect1 struct itself, formatted using the pretty print debug specifier, are printed, demonstrating how to define structs, pass them by reference to functions, and use debug printing for inspection. That's ownership-aware coding in action. Okay, we've learned how to define structs to hold our data, but what if we want to add behaviors or actions directly associated with that data? How do we make our custom data types not just store information, but also do things? Let's dive deep into methods and associated functions, two super important features that let you add behavior to your custom data types using the implementation block. First, let's understand how to define methods and use self. Let's start with our rectangle struct. Simple enough. It has a width and a height, both in signed integers. Now, if we wanted to do something with a rectangle, like calculate the area, we might start writing a standalone function like this. That works fine. But Rust gives us a better way to group behavior with data, using methods inside an implementation block. Let's rewrite that area function as a method. Let's pause here. A few things are happening. We use impl rectangle to start implementing methods for our rectangle struct. Inside, we define a function area that takes reference of self as the first argument. This is like using this keyword in other languages. It refers to the current instance. Self is borrowed immutably because we're not changing anything, just reading fields. So now we can create a rectangle and call the function area like this. And boom, we've just made our code object-oriented. Let's add a method that checks if one rectangle can fit inside another. We'll call it canHold. So this takes another rectangle as a reference and compares the dimensions. This implementation block defines a method canHold, for the rectangle struct that takes an immutable reference to another rectangle and returns true if self, the rectangle instance on which the method is called, is strictly larger in both width and height than the other rectangle, otherwise returns false. Here's how you can use it. We call the canHold method on rect1 with a reference to rect2. You can even nest methods and build logic around these checks. This is where methods really shine. Now what about creating constructor-like functions that belong to the struct itself, rather than existing independently? Let's understand how to create associated functions, like constructors, that make your code cleaner and more idiomatic. So, what if we want to create a rectangle in a more controlled way? For example, maybe we want a constructor that checks certain rules, or just makes the API cleaner. That's where we can use associated functions. These are functions defined in implementation blocks that don't take self as a parameter. They're called with path separator or double colon operator syntax instead of dot notation. Here's how we can create a new function. Here, self is just a shorthand for rectangle. This implementation block defines an associated function, new, for the rectangle struct that acts as a constructor, taking a width and height, both U32, and returning a new rectangle instance represented by self. And we can use it like this. We create a rectangle instance rect using rectangle. New. Associated function, acting as a constructor, with dimensions 60 by 80, then prints its area by calling the area method on the newly created rect. You'll see new used all over Rust code. It's idiomatic and neat. But what if we want to modify the struct? To do that, we need a mutable self-reference. Let's write a method that modifies the struct. This implementation block defines a mutable method scale for the rectangle struct, which takes a mutable reference to self and a factor, AU32, then multiplies both the width and height of the rectangle instance by that factor in place. Notice that the instance must be mutable, and the method must take a mutable reference. Now, in main, we can use it like this. We create a mutable rectangle instance rect using rectangle. New 1020, then scales it in place by a factor of 2 using the rect.scaled method, and finally prints its new dimensions, 20 by 40. This is Rust's way of enforcing safe, explicit mutation. If we accidentally try to call scale on a non-mutable rectangle, the compiler will stop us. Safety first. You can group methods and associated functions however you like. It's common to put constructors like new at the top, followed by instance methods, then helper methods. Also, you can have multiple implementation blocks, even split across files or modules. This gives you flexibility in organizing large code bases. Here's everything we've learned together in one example. We defined a rectangle struct, encapsulating width and height, and then used an implementation block to define several methods that operate on rectangle instances. The associated function, rectangle, new, acts as a constructor, creating new rectangle objects. The method's area, canHold, and scale provide behaviors. Area calculates the rectangle's area, taking an immutable reference. canHold method checks if one rectangle can contain another, also taking immutable references, and scale modifies the rectangle's dimensions in place, requiring a mutable reference. In main, rect1 is created as mutable, rect2 as immutable, and these methods are demonstrated to calculate area, compare sizes, and scale rect1. This example showcases how to add behavior to custom data types and manage ownership and mutability through method calls. Alright, so now you've seen how structs work, how to create them, update them, pass them around safely, and even how to debug them. Also, now you know how to implement methods and associated functions in using the implementation block. If this helped solidify your understanding, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with any questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, happy coding and keep rusting.